and welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the Ask Video Mail for the week of March 21st, 2011. Welcome to the site. To the new members, the Ask Video Mail is where you can get an answer to an animation problem or question you are having. So please send in questions if you'd like to see an Ask Video Mail on your question in the future. The way to get that to me is to just send an email to webmaster@kennyroy.com, and then I will look through all of the Ask Video Mail questions that are sent to me, and I pick out the ones that I think are going to benefit the most people. All the old members, you know exactly how this is done. Keep on sending in your questions because it's the best way to interact with the site by far. The testimonial program is going on right now. I'm going to leave that up for just another week. So if you want to earn 5 days free on the site, all you have to do is send in your name, your city and country if you're a professional or a student, and just a little paragraph, just a small couple sentences about your experience on the site and when you think of KennyRoy.com and the resources that I'm providing. And then boom, I will just instantly give you 5 days added on to the end of your subscription. So it's a really quick thing to do, and why not? You can just earn that free time and stick around longer. So a couple people have already taken advantage of that, and you'll start seeing those testimonials on the front page because I want people on the outside of the site to know how much resources are on the inside and how you guys are liking them. I hinted in the lecture last week that there's going to be a big announcement. The testimonial program is not the big announcement. It's still forthcoming. And so stay tuned for that. Pay very close attention. It's going to be very exciting. And let me see. I think that's it for announcements. Thank you for your support as always. Thank you for being here and spurring the site along and helping each other and just really making this a very positive experience. I'm still having a fantastic time. This week's Ask Video Mail question is: I love this question. Readability, you'll definitely hear this in production. Like, oh, that pose is not reading. Oh, that action's not reading. It's not reading. What is readability? As Francis started sort of to point out in his question, readability has a lot to do with, it's a combination of a lot of the fundamentals that are in animation. But I wanted to focus on one very specific application of readability that ties into cartoony animation after I run through the other ones that are mentioned here. Okay? Well, first, of course, pose has the most to do with readability. If you have a pose that is ambiguous, then you're going to obviously not be able to, at a glance or really quickly, have the audience pick up what you're going for. Since animation is about communication, you have to communicate the message. If the message is a character arc or an emotional change or you're forwarding the plot, anything, you have to make sure that that message is received. And that's the push and pull with pose, because we always want to avoid cliche. But the more you avoid cliche, the less you're going to be able to rely on that instant recognizability of that pose. And you're going to start moving towards the kind of ambiguous. Now, there are, of course, strong poses that are not ambiguous, that are not cliche as well, and those are the ones that we're trying to go for. So readability, first and foremost, has to do with you doing enough preparation, enough either thumbnailing or reference gathering to make sure that you've excuse me, at least have stepped outside of the realm of the cliche, but have not ventured so far away from it that you are completely ambiguous. You know, what does this pose mean? This basically means nothing, right? That pose was extremely super cliche, right? Super readable, definitely, but you wouldn't want to use that for the shocked person, would you? Okay? So, also, composition has a lot to do with readability. In composition, if you have a really large object filling the screen, that is basically taking all the attention of the audience, and then a small little action over here, then obviously that's not going to be readable. You need to make the action broad enough and the pose strong enough and the silhouette iconic enough that it actually takes the audience and makes it look at the action that you want it to. Okay, so in composition, just in terms of the shapes on screen, it needs to be attention grabbing, your action. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean wildly broad, but it does mean strong. Okay, the distance to camera in terms of composition as well. If a character is really up close, then that's very readable. Everything I'm doing up front, as fast as it is very readable. But all the way in back, if it's a character playing the piano, you can rely on the fingers. But if they're really far away, you can imagine that little finger movement like this. I mean, even the difference between this and this is very drastic. You imagine if I was 50 feet away trying to, play the piano. What you would do is you would take it out of the hands and really put it in the body and kind of telegraph that action forward and make it bigger and broader to the audience. And that's kind of a rule of thumb I like to impart on all my students, is that when you are dealing with distance and especially looking down looking way downfield, you have to make you have to especially change your actions to be not just in the small, like the extremities, but also in the full body action, full body posing, etc. Okay. So that has to do with composition, timing, and speed. All right, and also anticipation was brought up in the question. Okay, the thing with timing and speed is that it has a lot to do with how much you anticipate it, right? Because anticipation is two things. Number one, the first thing it is that as humans we realize that there's like kinetic energy that needs to be built up, and then, or I guess it's potential energy, and then it's released. So we have this way, basically, of sort of feeling like it's going to shoot the other way, so our eyes prepare for that in anticipation. If you're going to punch somebody, you wind up really big, and then you're not going to lose the audience when you swing it, right? But the thing is that the anticipation is also thought. And that's been very, very widely discussed, and that it's basically one of the sub-rules of animation. One of the sub-principles of animation is that anticipation is thought. So if you want to show the audience that the character is really thinking about something, then you're going to have them really wind up and then swing or whatever. So the more they anticipate, the more it's pre-planned and it's being thought about. Okay. However, the problem that arises is that if you anticipate something way too much, then you may be getting a little bit extra that you can get away with the speed of the action, but then you've betrayed the performance choice. All right, if something's supposed to be instinctual but fast, then you can't anticipate it really big, because then they thought about it. So there is the push and pull. Just like with pose, the push and pull is, trying to avoid ambiguity but not going too far into the cliche. With timing and speed, with that anticipation, in terms of readability, what we're talking about, that timing and speed of the anticipation has to be very, very, very carefully planned out so that you're not betraying the performance choice. The performance choice is the most important thing, okay? So think about that. And also in terms of timing and speed, if you're animating for television, then you can get away with a lot faster motions than you can if you're animating on a film. On every single feature film I've ever been on, there's been a note that's come back that this is too fast, because the audience has to whip their head as they're watching it on a screen. So, and if you're animating like an iPhone game, then you can go as fast as you possibly want. One frame across the screen, no problem, right? So that's also an issue. And then moving things one at a time. This was brought up in the question, and again, yes, it's a huge issue in terms of readability, but moving objects one at a time, not necessarily what you have to do to make one thing readable, right? So, for instance, it's a ping pong game. I can't remember where I first heard that, but I think Jason Schleifer is pretty much the one who I've heard it the most recent from. It's basically a ping pong or a tennis match. You know, where is the tennis ball? You have to know, as the animator, where the audience's eye is at all times. Knowing, of course, for instance, in dialogue, that the eye, when we watch it, is going to be pretty much just bouncing back and forth between the eyes and down to the mouth, and watching the facial pose peripherally, and then the body pose peripherally, because humans are very good at doing that, okay? You have to know that if it's dialogue, then it's going to be very hard for there to be a readable pose off screen or whatever. So just knowing where the eye is, you have to do even more. So maybe, again, if it's like if maybe a character in the background lighting a match, maybe you want them to bring it out, bring the whole box out in silhouette, so it's nice strong silhouette, not within the pose but out in the silhouette, and have them, you know, take the match and strike it that way or something like that. Just make it grab the attention and not rely on, you know, the few audience members that are going to like look over to the side. And that doesn't just have to do with animation. There are some, you know, filmmaking tricks that we use to make it so that, you know, the character in the background that's going to light the match and set the building on fire, and the character in the foreground is not even going to know. You know, we can use a color, right? Contrasting color or lighting to grab his attention. He steps into like a spotlight, and the eyes are going to zip right to him if he comes out of total blackness and steps into the spotlight. Even if this character is speaking up front, like, yeah, I spilled some gas on the ground. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I should clean up the gasoline, or it'll evaporate, right? And then all of a sudden this guy like steps out. This person could go on and on and on about what they're going to do and how they're going to clean it, but we're going to be watching that guy with the match light the match, aren't we? So all of these things definitely contribute to readability the most, but you have to make sure that you're just, you know, first and foremost, animation is communication, and that message is getting across. But what I wanted to tie this into was the cartoony lecture. Because if you haven't seen the cartoony lecture, you really ought to check it out, because it basically is the beginning of cartoony workflow, and it's the first two steps of a cartoony workflow, and those first two steps are what breaks and makes basically 99% of student and beginner work absolutely not work for cartoony animation. Okay, so those first two steps are pivotal, are key. You can't live without them. And why readability ties very nicely into cartoony animation is because when we choose what we want that cartoony character to look like, it's half because we want to base everything in physics and in real life situations, and basically pluck a familiar note, you know, hit a familiar note and resonate with the audience. But it's also half because it is infinitely more readable to do it like that. So for instance, if a character is going to zip out of a scene, then we might have them wind up like a rubber band and shoot out of screen. But we didn't say to ourselves, like, okay, how would the muscles in that character have to work to make it so that he looks like a rubber band? No, we're basically just animating the character as a rubber band. We're taking rubber band physics and we're evoking that. So because we pluck that string, what happens for the audience is that they can really quickly follow it. If they see him stretching this way, they know, their brain prepares them for him to fire out the other way, meaning it's going to be perfectly readable. No problems with readability, okay? If he smushes on the ground like Tom in Tom and Jerry, and a weight smushes him, you know, to a pancake, and then the weight pops off and he starts moving like an accordion, when his body goes down like this and up to this side, when it comes back down, where's it going to go? Ask yourself right now. So he gets squished, goes whoop, whoop, where's it going to go? Hopefully you said over here, right? Because we know as an audience what that accordion motion is. So you can get away with a lot more detail in the facial performance. Why? Because it's not an arbitrary facial performance. You're animating your character around like this, and you don't know where I'm going to go right now, and you're having trouble keeping your eye on where my head is, right? And it's hard to read my lip sync. If this were an animation that I just did, you would say, oh my God, that lip sync is totally unreadable. But if you have his head attached to the end, you know exactly where my hand is going. That's his head in that accordion motion. So we rely on the actual physical animation that we choose for our cartoony performances, mostly, I said half and half, but now I'm changing it, mostly because of readability. And then also because it gives us a really strong physical impression of what just happened to the character, or what that character is doing. Okay, so please check out the cartoony animation lecture. It's my biggest, it was the most requested lecture that I ever had, and it really starts with workflow of cartoony animation, which you should all check out. Thank you for the great question. Please, if you want to see your question answered in an Ask Video Mail, you have to send it in to me. The email address is webmaster@kennyroy.com. I look through all of them, and I pick them out and upload them here. So thanks again for your support. Welcome to the new members, and thanks for sticking around to the old. Keep just kicking butt, guys. I'm very happy to be here, and hope you're happy too, okay? Good luck with your work, and as always, rock on.